All right. And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast, the ultimate episode of the 2022-2023 NFL season. My name is Lewis, and I have my beautiful co host next to me, Mr. Laraib.
Yes, sir. Welcome to the 2022 season of the NFL. A lot of great teams this season. A lot of teams we're excited for. But let's get straight into it. Let's explain our schedule a little bit for this season, Lewis.
Yeah, so we're gonna try to do 2 episodes a week, and we'll do a weekly preview and a weekly review, recapping the week beforehand. That will be an episode. We'd like to drop that every Monday, and then we'll do another preview podcast for the next week, and we'll do that. Those should be dropping Thursdays. Schedules may vary depending on what we're doing, but we want to be consistent this season. We want to give y'all our thoughts, our opinions for what I think is going to be one of the most exciting NFL seasons that I've been looking forward to in a long time, just because it's anyone's season. This is the most wide open I've seen the NFL in a long time, and I'm really excited to be covering it with you.
Yep, that's for sure. Let's go over some things that we're going to be doing this season, Lewis. Last year we introduced the this or that segment, and this year we want to get a little bit more into the sports betting area. I know sports betting has gotten a lot bigger in the past couple of years, moving into your home or into our home state of Louisiana, Mr. Butler.
Our home state, don't forget it. Don't forget it.
Yes, sir, our home state. Always leave us suggestions about some new segments. You guys might have any ideas, drop them down for us below in the comment section, and we'll be sure to mix up stuff if you guys are interested in that kind of thing. But Lewis, let's go ahead and get into our program for tonight.
Yeah, so we didn't want to do too much tonight. We just want to kind of give you an update on what we're doing for this season, but also we're not going to leave you hanging without any NFL content. And this season, as we're talking about, there's a lot to go into. I am the resident Saints fan, born and raised in Louisiana, tons of ties, been to so many Saints home games. A Saints lifer, you could say. Same for you, right, with your Seahawks fandom?
Yeah, I've been to two Seahawks games in my entire life.
Okay.
My 21 and a half years of existence, I've been to two.
In Seattle,
Seahawks
right?
games. No, there was one in New Orleans and one in Texas, but it was just where I was at the time, so it was just what was most convenient for me. But
Hey,
speaking of your New Orleans Saints, Lewis, let's talk about them. What do you expect for them for this season?
so the 2021 Saints had a very up and down season, ultimately leading to a 9-8 record without a playoff appearance. And as much as that seems like a disappointing season, you have to factor in all the adversity that team went through last year in terms of a hurricane disrupting the first part of their season, playing home games and neutral sites on the road. There was whole coaching staffs getting wiped out because of COVID. There were games where Dennis Allen, the now head coach, was being the interim head coach at Tampa and still winning these games. And with a very promising 5-2 record, the ultimate, just nail in the coffin was Jameis Winston, the starting quarterback, going down with a knee injury against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Still finishing 9-8 is a testament to this team's character and this team's pliability and to play in adversity. However, a lot of that can be attributed to the head coach, Sean Payton, who retired this offseason, probably be coaching the Dallas Cowboys next year, but whatever. We'll get a nice, hefty price for him because he's still under contract. But the loss of Sean Payton is definitely the biggest thing on people's minds because you saw kind of the transformation of Jameis when he was playing last year. And a lot of people attributed that as playing, redshirting kind of a season underneath Drew Brees and Sean Payton, and then still under Sean Payton's tutelage, getting those reps, having him kind of in his ear, helping him along the way. And you saw him kind of really restrict Jameis early, but as the game went on, he could do more and more and more as Sean Payton trusted him with a weaker receiving core. So not having Sean Payton does sound bad. However, Saints offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael, who's been there ever since their Super Bowl winning season in 2009, is going to be helping Jameis. So it's not that big of a drop off. I think Dennis Allen, his continuity with the defense, he's been the defensive coordinator in New Orleans since 2016. So he knows the culture, he knows the guys. And like I said, last year he had interim coaching experience in really big games in which the Saints won. So, in terms of how the outlook for this season is, I'm excited. My expectations are not very high. So, it's kind of a season where I have to watch how the team plays. There's a lot of exciting offseason additions, including Jarvis Landry. We're getting Michael Thomas back from injury. Tyrann Mathieu on the defensive side, drafting a rookie in Chris Olave, drafting a rookie in Trevor Penning, who is going to miss the first part of the season with a turf toe injury, but he's still going to be exciting for us if he can get on the field. There's just a lot to look forward to with the Saints team, but there's a lot of question marks as well, which is why I'm hesitant to really go all in on them. But my prediction would be a 10-7 record, and then a potential playoff berth.
Yeah, and I think I might be a little bit higher on the Saints than you are, Lewis. I know you have a lot of questions about what this team can do this offseason, but you just kept on listing off thing after thing after thing that your team improved on, and the chemistry from last season is definitely going to carry over to this year. And you talk about the upgrade of their wide receiver core. It's a massive upgrade from last year where you have Marquez Callaway and Traquan Smith. So now you have Michael Thomas back, like you were saying, Chris Olave, the rookie, and Jarvis Landry, Louisiana native, playing in New Orleans. You guys did lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and that's a big blow. But you bring in Tyrann Mathieu, you have Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, two premier defensive players in the NFL. So I'm excited for the Saints this year. And y'all have owned Tampa Bay for the past 2 seasons, so you could potentially be looking at winning your division.
Now, I do like the value of that, but I will say, you said I didn't bring up many question marks. My biggest is, well, not only the loss of Sean Payton, there were some questionable, a lot of defensive losses that are kind of underrated. Malcolm Jenkins retiring. You lose Marcus Williams to free agency. And then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was just traded not too long ago. So the 3 key secondary pieces that you're missing from last season. However, you add Marcus May, you add from the Jets, really underrated safety. You add Tyrann Mathieu, of course, and you add Justin Evans, underrated special team kind of safety for the Buccaneers last year. So you're kind of getting a lot of that value back, but you're losing that continuity of those guys who've been playing with each other for a long time under Dennis Allen. So a lot of my questions aren't really that big. But the biggest question is Jameis. Coming off an injury with these weapons, Michael Thomas hasn't really been playing that much in the training camp, and he didn't play at all in the preseason. So are they going to have a good connection, since Jameis has never played with Michael Thomas in a real game because Michael Thomas was injured all of last year. And you still have Jarvis, you still have Chris Olave, who are markedly better than what he had last year. But at the same time, it's just that really big question mark, which prevents me. And I kind of hold my bias back a little bit. I can't go full hometown 13-4, watch out for us, as much as I'd like to. I got to make sure that my expectations are in check, because if my expectations are low and they exceed it, I'll be happy. If they're low and they meet it, then that's what I thought.
All right, but let's move on to my Seattle Seahawks. The big talk of the offseason, of course, our Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterback, Russell Wilson, was traded to the Denver Broncos. And in return, we got Drew Lock as our starting quarterback. Well, Geno Smith will be the starting quarterback for this upcoming season. And, I don't know what my expectations are for the Seahawks this season. We could go 2 ways. We could go the tanking route. We're just absolutely going to just throw away the season and, go for those upper echelon quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. Or, we can go for a wild card spot. I feel like we have a sneaky good team. We still have those 2 stud wideouts on the outside with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And then we drafted Ken Walker. And then we also have Rashad Penny, who was a late season hero last year for a lot of you guys in fantasy. And then on the defensive side, I feel like we drafted some nice young key pieces. Kobe Bryant, not the one from basketball, cornerback Kobe Bryant. Also, we have a defensive edge, Bofe May, who's been shown out in the preseason. And then Jordan Brooks, who we drafted 3 years ago, who's been really mentored by Bobby Wagner, was second leading tackler in the NFL last year. So I feel like we can have 2 possible outcomes for this team. But either way, I'm excited for a nice season. Pete Carroll, he really is going to emphasize running the ball this year, I think. We saw Geno Smith last year, didn't really excel and Drew Lock really hasn't shown much in the preseason. So I think we're going to be a really ground and pound team this year. We're going to try to, have those nice defensive games where you can run the ball and control the clock. And let's see what that gets us this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see the positives. This is definitely a rebuilding year for Seattle, and it's hard to see otherwise when your starting quarterback is Geno Smith. Now, you did list a lot of positives, and I think this team isn't the dredge of the NFL, if that gives you any consolation. But at the same time, as a Seahawks fan, Laraib, I want to put this back to you. Do you really want to do well after, seeing some of the high quarterback prospects, Stroud, Young? I saw a lot from Anthony Richardson of the Florida Gators last night. So do you really want to see a promising season from your young guys, of course, but would you like to tank? Yes or no?
I'm going to go no, Lewis. Let's think back to 3 seasons ago. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers with your starting quarterback, Jameis Winston, went on, I think they were 8-8 or 7-9 season. And you know what they had? They had 2 stud wide receivers, a solid defense with some great players like Levante David and Devin White. And then next year they got Tom Brady and they instantly won the Super Bowl. So in my mind, that's also something that this Seahawks team could do. We have a stud defensive player with Jordan Brooks at the linebacker position. We have some young, nice key pieces that we drafted on the outside and the safety positions. So, and we have 2 stud wide receivers. So if we could have a solid season, go 7-10, and prove to some of these teams, we have a great defense. All we're missing is a good quarterback, and we're in that, upper echelon of teams, then we can convince some disgruntled quarterback on a different team to come to our team, and we can, maybe do something with that.
Let me throw this back at you. There's a really good quarterback, Super Bowl winning, Pro Bowl caliber quarterback who just got moved this offseason. His name was Russell Wilson. So, he moved from your team. So why would another star quarterback want to go into a situation that Russell Wilson, one of the most intelligent quarterbacks in the league, wanted to leave? Is Pete Carroll still the head coach? Yes. Is John Schneider still the GM? Yes. In terms of that relationship, what do you think the appeal of Seattle is for a quarterback besides, a good roster? But the appeal for Tom Brady was also the Bruce Arians, Todd Bowles, and Byron Leftwich. It was also a GM who would spin, and kind of was at Tom Brady's beck and call. He brought in Antonio Brown. He brought in Rob Gronkowski. John Snyder's not as willing. We saw Wagner leave as well this offseason. So that logic, the Seahawks, their best teams and their best, they're not exactly a free agency hot hub. No one really wants to go to Seattle. And you think of their best players that they've had all time. Russ Wilson, they drafted. Sherman, all the Legion of Boom, they drafted. Bobby Wagner, they drafted. Even go back to the 2003 team. They drafted all those players. So it's hard for me to see the angle you're coming from given this team's history. Now, under a new regime, with maybe a new blood and a new kind of energy towards the team, because right now this energy and this regime seems pretty lifeless.
Well, I agree with you, but if you go back to our draft history, then that we usually blow our first round draft pick, right? That's the joke of the Seattle Seahawks. We either blow the draft pick or we trade it away to somebody else and get something in return, right? You talk about Bobby Wagner, where was he drafted? Third round, Russell Wilson, 3rd round. Richard Sherman, almost end of the draft, right? Yep. So we are a good drafting team, and that's what I feel like we drafted a lot of good pieces for this year. And I like what you're saying about the disgruntlement between, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson, how that ended. But if you look at any quarterback who's like, well, if I can put this aside for 1 season and go here, and I have a legitimate chance to win a Super Bowl, then I feel like they can work something out for a season or 2 and get that win. Especially if you're looking at somebody who hasn't won already before, then especially they'll be like, this is my opportunity to go to a team who has a known history. Pete Carroll's one of the most winning quarterbacks or coaches in the NFL. The Seahawks have been one of the most winningest teams in the past decade. And so you see how this team is built, and you're like, this is my opportunity. I'm going to go here and have a chance to win a Super Bowl.
It's just hard for me to see that anytime soon. But we'll agree to disagree. It's going to be a
That's just
fun
wishful
season.
thinking on my part.
It'll be a fun season regardless, no matter who your quarterback is in 2 years and why it's still going to be Drew Lock. But we're going to move on now to talk about some other teams in the NFL that we're excited and we're kind of down on this year, contrary to the public opinion. And these are kind of the teams maybe you can say we have an agenda for. We've had teams and we've had players that we support, and they're kind of our guys. And you'll kind of pick up on that as the season progresses. But there's also some teams that, according to the Vegas odds, according to just fans in general, maybe they're too low on or not high on enough. And some teams that they're too high on that we disagree with. And so I want to start with a team that's called the highs and lows. And my first team that I'm high on is the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles last year, finishing 9-8, made the wild card. And after a really disappointing wild card loss, their biggest problems were they had an injured offensive line. Their receiving weapons weren't really impressive whatsoever. Their defensive secondary was one of the worst in the NFL. And they just had a kind of old, mature roster that needed a little bit of juice. Now, Jalen Hurts was also a problem last season, and he's still the starting quarterback going into this season. But how did they help him in the offseason? Well, they gave him one of the best receivers in the NFL in A.J. Brown. It's another year under Nick Sirianni, and a team that in the second half of the season, they figured out that running the ball with Jalen Hurts, putting the ball in his hands and into Miles Sanders' hands and the other running backs led them to a more productive run-heavy offense, which they thrived in. And I think that's going to continue into the season. So another year with that coach and quarterback duo, which I think is one of the more underrated duos in the entire league, along with one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL. All these studs coming back. Of course, you have Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks supposed to be healthy this season, Mailata, a lot of these guys. There are injury concerns on that offensive line. But if this unit can stay healthy, they're definitely one of the best, if not the best offensive lines in football. And I think the biggest change this season is their defense. They go out, they draft the two Georgia studs, Nakobe Dean and Jordan Davis, on that defensive front, which was already had a really good defensive front. So you're just kind of adding strength to strength. And then that secondary, you bring in James Bradbury, you bring in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and another year for experience for guys like Marcus Epps, Avonte Maddox, who had their flashes in the past, but just needed more consistent play. I think this team, under this coaching staff, and especially their schedule, is the second easiest in the NFL based off of win projections for this season. So everything is pointing up for the Eagles, and I am very high on them as I have them finishing with the best record in the NFC this season. Laugh all you may. And yes, the question mark is Jalen Hurts, but give him great protection, great weapons. He's a stud, and he's going to show that this season. Now, is he the quarterback franchise of the future? If he can prove that, then there's no question they're the best team in the NFL. That's how talented I think this Eagles roster is.
Yeah, there's no doubt they have a great roster, but I think the most important thing that you were highlighting is going to be that schedule. Playing in that NFC East division, you're not going to have much competition. Even the Cowboys, they lost Tyron Smith. They have a lot of questions on that team. They lose Amari Cooper. So that division looks like it's wide open for them to take. And we've seen this type of, team before. Think back to the 49ers a couple of years ago, that ground and pound team with that great defense. It can take you really far. It took them all the way to the Super Bowl and just one overthrown pass away by Jimmy Garoppolo from winning it. So, this team definitely has a recipe for success. I think, ground and pound in the NFL, I know a lot more these days, it's a lot more pass heavy, but one of those traditional old school style teams where you ground and pound the ball and pass when you need to, it's going to be a recipe for success this year.
Yeah, I like that. It shows this team is tough. And A.J. Brown, yes, he's a flashy weapon, but at the same time, he's one of the best run after the catch, breaking through contact, just tough receivers. And I think this is going to be this team's identity this season under Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. That's why I'm excited. So go on to your first team for your highs.
Well, I got to pick my boy Jay Herbo, Justin Herbert leading my Chargers to victory this season. We know they already have a really good offense with Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Austin Eckler. They bring in the rookie Isaiah Spiller, who's just like an Austin Eckler 2.0. And then Lewis, think about all the defensive additions they've had in this offseason with Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. Derwin James is going to be healthy this year. So everything is looking up for this team. You talk about the AFC West, and I know you mentioned, it's going to be a lot of cannibalism, right? All these really good teams in there. But I think my boy Justin Herbert, MVP season loading for him, and they're going to come out on top on this division. Also, don't forget about second-year wide receiver Joshua Palmer, who really shined in the preseason. I think this team really has what it takes to get over the hump this year. Another year with head coach Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert, their connection is only going to keep on getting better and better, and I have high hopes for the season for this team this season.
I agree with a lot of your points, and I do like this team. I think this team is a playoff team, and I really like Justin Herbert. I still want to see him on a kind of a big stage. Prove it to me. Just more of it. I think he has the talent, and I think he will thrive in big stages. I just need to see it more. And I think he can do that, but I just want to see it. The biggest question I have with this team is the run defense was one of the worst units in the entire NFL. And I just don't see how they improved that in this offseason. You had a guy in Khalil Mack. He's a pass rusher. He's decent against the run, but that's not what he's known. He's known for quarterback being very aggressive, and he's kind of old. He's dealt with injuries. And you had also had a corner who, doesn't really do much in the run game. So that's my biggest question mark. But then again, you look at the teams in the AFC West who are led by high octane quarterbacks, and their biggest strength is passing the ball. So you can say in this division, it's going to work into their favor because a lot of these teams aren't really known for their running games, and they're not going to be able to abuse the Chargers as much as they did in the past. But that is my biggest concern for them against those teams. Like the Titans, the Colts, and then the Eagles and other heavy rushing teams. I don't think they can match that physicality in the run defense.
Yeah, for sure, and also include the Ravens on that list. But I feel like Justin Herbert is going to be able to keep up with any team offensively, no matter how many points their defense can give up. They'll be able to go toe to toe with anybody. And
but if he's not on the field, then what's he going to do?
Well, you talk about him not being in the playoffs ever. Well, last year they had the opportunity and their team squandered it to go with the tie with the Raiders to make the playoffs. But this year, I think they're going to put it all together, and this is my boy Justin Herbert's year.
Any wild predictions? What's your outlook for this team?
All I can say is they'll win their division.
Okay.
But moving on, Lewis, let's go to your second high team. Who are you looking at this year?
Well, you had mentioned this is another AFC team, and you can kind of see a trend of the teams I like. You like these finesse, pretty boy Chargers teams, high flash, high fashion. I'm more into the real football players, and that is the Baltimore Ravens, the tough guys, the bullies of the NFL. And a little backtrack onto their 2021 NFL season, they lose their 3 running backs in preseason training camp. And they lose 2 of their starting cornerbacks. What's his name? I'm
Marcus
blanking.
Peters
and
the guy who causes a lot of fumbles.
Marlon Humphrey.
Yeah.
So he went down kind of in the middle of the season. But the biggest thing for this team, they had all these injuries, they had all this bad luck, but still with Lamar Jackson, they had the best record in the AFC through 9 weeks. And when he went down, that's kind of when the team fell apart and they end up not making the playoffs. So you can look back at their season without the context and say, oh, they were a disappointing team last year. However, with the context, you can see this team is still one of the best programs and one of the best teams in the NFL and in the AFC. And out of all the teams that missed the playoffs last season, including the Chargers, I think the Ravens have the highest outlook to get back into the playoffs, not just because injury luck is going to be in their favor this season, which is impossible to predict. But they add a great safety from my New Orleans Saints, Marcus Williams, who is just a proven player, a proven starter, along with that, just one of the best secondaries in all of football. Another year of Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews kind of getting involved in the passing game. J.K. Dobbins comes back. Their offensive line, they lost Ronnie Stanley last year too. He's back healthy this season. There's just a lot to look forward to. Some of the young and upcoming pass rushers, Wafe, he really showed up last season, and I'm really excited for this team. And in their division with the Bengals coming off a Super Bowl win, I'm really high. I love Joe Burrow, you know that, and I really like the Bengals team. But I think this Ravens team is my pick to win that division and secure a playoff spot in the AFC. And they'll be hosting a playoff game in December in Baltimore with Poe on the sideline cheering the boys on. Bring home the Ravens.
Yeah, Lewis, you talked about some really good points for your Ravens, and you're also comparing them to your Eagles team. But let me tell you something the Eagles have that the Ravens don't. Two solid wide receivers. Now, like you're saying, Rashad Bateman, his second year with Lamar Jackson. We'll see how that goes. But, when you talk about you say, I like these really high passing teams. Well, what happens when you're down 28-7? What are you going to do? You can't ground and pound the ball all the way down the field and waste 10 minutes on the clock. You got to pass the ball. You got to get yards down the field quickly.
I'm sorry, but that's such a tired narrative. Last season against the Chiefs, Lamar had one of the worst first halves of all time, 3 interceptions. He looked completely out of himself. They're down 21-3, comes back and wins the game with no real receivers. Don't tell me Hollywood Brown. He was not good in that Ravens offense.
So then tell me why the Cardinals you're just using a first round draft pick to trade for him if he wasn't that good.
Well, he was a first round draft. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bum, but he just did not work in that offense. And I don't think this offense needs a premier receiver. Harken back to Lamar's MVP season, he didn't have a receiver to catch over 500 yards. Yes, Andrews had over 1,000, but he does not need in this offense. He is the offense. He is the control. Yes, when it comes to playoff time, you might need one of those higher caliber receivers that you can trust late in the game. Odell Beckham, just saying, he's still a free agent. I'm just going to throw his name out there. But as of now, this team needs to just lean on its running game, on its tight ends, and on Lamar in a contract here where he's going to prove the Ravens that he is worth every penny to be paid the highest quarterback in the NFL, which he deserves.
Well, I definitely do agree with you. This offense is really the best in the NFL built around their star player. You think about anybody else in the same position as Lamar Jackson, if he had any other offensive coordinator or head coach, are they designing a system as well as they are for him? Probably not. So I will have to agree with you. They designed the system really well. And, I agree with you that they'll win their division, but let's see how it goes when they really need to, air it out down the field when they go down big, anytime during the season or in the playoffs. But moving on to another one of these high passing teams that I'm high on is the Kansas City Chiefs. I know I said the Chargers are my favorites to win that division, but let's talk about the Chiefs and what they did this offseason. You bring in Juju Smith-Schuster, a great possession wide receiver, and then you bring in MVS from Green Bay Packers, a great receiver who can stretch the field. He isn't a Tyreek Hill, but he's still, that deep threat that keeps the defense on their toes. And then they draft your guy, Sky Moore. I know you're really high on him. And then the offensive line, they brought in 2 guys last year, and they weren't really able to mesh that well. But Joe Tooney and Orlando Brown, let's see what they can do on that offensive line. And then Creed Humphrey, a lot of people said he was going to be offensive player of the year last year, just on his play, which was really good, or excuse me, offensive rookie of the year, but on his play was really good. So let's see what they can do. Clyde has been a little bit of a disappointment, but let's see what he can do. And then on the defensive side, I know they lose Tyrann Mathieu, but Frank Clark being healthy this year, Chris Jones being healthy this year, Snead being healthy this year. Let's see what they can do. And then with Steve Spag as a defensive coordinator, they'll always be frisky. They'll be bad in the beginning of the season, but he's always turned around for them in the later half. So I like this team. And, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, those are the 3 names that you need to know for this team. And, they can always be frisky and take you far.
So you look at the AFC West and you look coach quarterback. That's what a lot of people look at when they're talking about the best teams in the NFL. And historically, that is what's required. Coach quarterback. Now there's outliers, Foles and Peterson. Underrated, but, they won a Super Bowl. But you look at this division. Mahomes and Reed are so far ahead of the other quarterback coach combinations in this division. Like it's not all of it. It's not all of it. Don't get me wrong, but that alone gives me the confidence that this team is going to be the best in their conference. Well, they lose Tyreek Hill. Yeah, they missed him. They lost, in the 7 games he missed, they lost. They won 5-2 in those 7 games, which I mean, he was a great luxury to have. He was an amazing field spacer. He did so much for the offense. Yes. However, the contract that he demanded was just too rich for their blood. They needed to pay Mahomes, and that's a sacrifice going to make because the biggest weapon you can have is Patrick Mahomes with time. Because if you give Patrick Mahomes a clean pocket, it doesn't matter if me and you are out there. He's going to make the plays to help you win a game. I have that much faith in him and the trajectory on his career. He has proven to me over and over. He's never lost more than 12 games in his career. I mean, he's never won less than 12 games in his career. And he's always pushed the AFC championship every year of his career. He's never lost the division in his career. And he's only lost he's only lost 3 divisional games in his career. So for you to say that Brandon Staley and Justin Herbert are all of a sudden going to take division away from it, Andy Reid's still there, Mahomes is still there, Kelsey is still there, and yeah, you gave credit to the defense. I don't think they're gonna be that great of a unit, but can they do enough to have the playmakers to make those big plays late in game? I think so. I like Justin Reid to replace Tyrann Mathieu. I think he's kind of a younger, cheaper option that I don't like as much as Tyrann, but he does a lot of the same stuff, and he's going to be really effective for them. Losing Sorensen may have been, cutting your losses. I mean, that may have been a good thing for them.
That's addition by subtraction right there.
Absolutely, I love that.
Well, he joined your team, so
he's gonna be
that's subtraction by addition.
He's gonna be a great special teamer, I'll tell you that. So I really like the Chiefs this year. They didn't make exactly my highest team, like yours, but because everyone knows the Chiefs are gonna be good. Let's just say that everyone knows the Chiefs are gonna be good. But what is the opposite of good, my friend? What is the opposite of high expectations? That is low expectations, and that is what we have for our 2 lows teams. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get it started. The Cleveland Browns are one of my lows team. A spotty offseason, to say the least, Laraib. I don't think a lot of people disagree that they've had one of the stranger off seasons in NFL history, and not for the good Stranger Things season 4 off seasons. I'm talking like episode 9 Stranger Things season 2 type of off seasons. Like you kind of want to skip and miss those ugly parts. And of course, I'm talking about Deshaun Watson. Really don't want to get into it much here. 11-game suspension. And he, in those first 11 games, the Browns play one of the harder schedules in the NFL with Jacoby Brissett, who is an awful NFL quarterback. People give him way too much credit for, yes, he had his moments in the past. I liked what he did when he was the Colts starting quarterback back in the day. He had some nice plays when he backed up Brady and Garoppolo on the Patriots, but he was really bad last year for the Dolphins. Do not get that mistaken. He was really bad. So you put him in a Cleveland Browns offense with really one outside weapon in Amari Cooper. Yes, they have a good offensive line. Yes, they have a good running game, but I don't think it's enough to get them over the hump against a really tough division. I like the other 3 teams a lot in this division. Yes, Pittsburgh, but I think you'll get to them.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a nice debate. And they play the NFC South and they play the AFC West. That's one of the hardest schedules you can have in terms of teams out of your division you're playing. And these first games, man, it's a gauntlet that I really only see them coming out with 2 wins. And by that time, you ask yourself, if you're Deshaun Watson, you're the Cleveland Browns front office, what's the point of trying to make a playoff push if you're sitting at 2, 3, 4 wins at that point in the season and you're pretty much out of the playoff hunt if you're not already statistically eliminated? What's the point of going out there? And Deshaun Watson, yes, he has his off the field issues, but he's on the field issues as well. He's not a healthy player. So why risk a potential injury for a huge gamble you made in the offseason for a lost season? So that's why I think the Cleveland Browns are going to have a really, I wouldn't say underwhelming year, because I think it'd be a good thing for them. However, they do not have a first-round pick this year because of the Deshaun Watson trade. So you can throw that logic right back at me. but I do not think the Cleveland Browns are going to even make a playoff push. I don't think they're going to win 5 games this season.
Yeah, and the big thing that I'm gonna highlight that you were saying is gonna be that schedule, right? They play in a really tough division. Like you're saying, we'll get to the Steelers in a little bit, but tough division and a tough schedule. It's really gonna put an emphasis on, what do we want the season to be? Are we gonna be, we're gonna finish strong going into next year and have a lot more confidence in our team, or we're gonna shut it down, not risk any ACL tears from anybody, not risk any unwanted injuries, and prepare for next season where they'll be a lot more competitive. They can get another wide receiver too in the offseason, try to keep some of those big name offensive lineman players and Nick Chubb and see what they can do next season. We know, if they can manage the game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, that two running back duo, if they can manage those games and have a solid defense and they can eke out a couple wins more than the two that you're saying in those first 9 games, and Deshaun Watson comes back and they're really tight in that playoff race in the AFC, then I can see them putting the pedal to the metal and going all in. But like you're saying, it really depends on how those first 9 games go, and what this team is going to look like when Sean Washington comes back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's one of the teams we're down on. Laura, what are one of the two teams that you are not too high on this season?
Well, they're in the same division as the Cleveland Browns, your Pittsburgh Steelers that you're so
That's
high
all
and
right.
mighty on.
I'm not that
Um,
high on,
well, can you
but
tell me
yeah,
what's the difference between the Browns and the Steelers? Two really good teams with great defenses, and then you have the Steelers with a mediocre offensive line, a running back, the
bad.
comparable running back, and then Mitch Trubisky, who you're saying, is he better than Jacoby Brissett in your eyes?
Yes, absolutely.
By how
There's
much?
no
By how much standard?
by a country mile. I think Jacoby Brissett is that bad. I'm not joking.
Okay, but Mitch Trubisky, where would you rank him as a starting quarterback in the NFL?
He's definitely bottom half of the league. However, we're talking about Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're not talking about apples to apples here. This is the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're not comparable. The defenses alone, you have, one of the best defense in the NFL. And yes, Browns have some good players here and there. Their secondary doesn't match up to the Steelers. Their linebackers are not, who I can't even name them. And then TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, that's kind of a wash. You still and what you overpaid for Jadeveon Clowney? Meh. There's not much to get excited about for their defense, which is half the league, maybe top 12. I don't see them as a top 10, top 5 unit. The Steelers are a top 5 defensive unit, I think, undoubtedly. And the outside weapons that Mitch has to work with: Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth, Najee Harris. He has a lot to work with. Yes, the offensive line is definitely worse than the Cleveland Browns, but
I would
he's
go
going to
as
be put
far to
in
say it's bottom 5 in the
situations.
entire league.
Steelers do a really good job of drafting and developing offensive linemen, and they have always had. So I kind of want to see that first. And I just trust in Mike Tomlin, who's never had a losing season in his career, which is kind of an overrated stat, I will say. But for this reason, it's hard not to trust the Steelers. Then the Browns. It's the Browns. It's Cleveland Browns that you're telling me I'm too low on. You're way too low on the Steelers. You're about to make me a Steelers
You're about to
fan.
do something. You're about to do something crazy here. But no, I just can't trust that offensive line. I know you keep on talking about, head coaches, head coaches. We're about to get to your next team about head coaches, and we'll talk about head coaches there. But eventually that plane that flew all the way up to the top of the mountain, eventually it has to come back down. And this is going to be the season where they're going to start slowly coming back down to reality. And we talk about their division. Well, they have a really tough division. I know you can say whatever you want to say about the Browns, but whenever they play against each other, they're, hard mouth, really tough games that each team is trying their hardest to win. And so, it's going to be a difficult season for them, in my opinion.
Was last year's Ben Roethlisberger better than Mitch Trubisky? I'm asking you. I'm. This isn't rhetorical.
Yes, but not by that much. I mean, no, but not by that much.
You're saying Ben Roethlisberger of last year was a better quarterback than you think Mitch Trubisky is going to be.
If you're asking me if Mitchell Trubisky is
That's what
better
I'm
than Ben
asking you.
Roethlisberger, I'm saying yes, but it's not by much. It is not by much.
It's still an upgrade. It's an upgrade at the most important position in football. And Ben Roethlisberger had a bad offensive line last year too. So you're getting a better offensive line, not albeit that doesn't mean it's good, but it's better. And you have a better quarterback with better receiving options and another year for Najee Harris and a better running back room. The offense is going to be better, and the defense is still going to be good. And
How many seasons did Ben Roethlisberger play in Pittsburgh? What type of chemistry? What type of chemistry did he have with his offensive coordinator and with his head coach? What type of chemistry did he have?
Was a first-year offensive coordinator last year.
What type of chemistry did he have with his head coach on that team?
Oh, I mean multiple. But what's your point?
Well, I'm just talking about from a chemistry standpoint. When you're incorporated into a system, you know the ins and outs of everything. Coming in.
Hated Ben Roethlisberger. Like, stop.
Oh, okay. So I guess he hated all the Super Bowls that they won. But let's move on to
when Ben Roethlisberger won this many Super Bowl MVPs. Yeah.
Let's move on to your second low team.
So I just ranted about culture, defense, stability of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and why I like them. And I might sound a bit hypocritical here, but the New England Patriots is just a team I cannot get behind this season. And you might be like, well, Bill Belichick, stability, the Patriot way. What's the difference between them and the Steelers? The difference is, what is there to be excited about on this team? What elite players are you looking forward to make an impact on this team? They have the highest salary cap hit for any skill position group in the entire NFL, and they probably have the worst skill position group of any team in the NFL. Your starting receivers are Devontae Parker, Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, and Nelson Aguilar. I mean, mid is even a stretch. Mid might be too good for them. And the tight ends, Hunter Henry, yeah, he's worth an investment. Not if he can stay healthy. He was healthy last year. And Johnny Smith was awful for them. And their offensive line, they traded away their best offensive lineman, Shaq Mason, to the Buccaneers. So that got worse. And their best offensive play caller, one of the best offensive minds in the NFL, Josh McDaniels, is no longer with the team. And who did they replace him with? Well, probably another offensive staff member of the team, probably the offensive line coach or the running backs coach. No, they bring in Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, a defensive coach and a special teams coach who, in their last stints as head coaches, were miserable and had awful offenses. I remember a game in which Joe Judge ran a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 9 in their own territory. It's very questionable. Now, I'm not as low on them as I am the Browns. I don't think they're going to be a putrid team. I think their defense, yes, they lost J.C. Jackson. Yes, they lost Kyle Van Noy. They lost some defensive line depth. But with Bill Belichick, you can always say that you believe in the defense, and I'm going to say that. I still think their defense is going to be above average. But that offense throughout the preseason looked so overmatched, so overwhelmed that at this moment, I'm even questioning Bill Belichick. I don't think this is a playoff team. They made the playoffs last year, and you might be like, well, there's a lot of really good teams in the AFC. That's not why you should be low on them. I don't think they're going to even be close to a playoff team. They're not even going to finish second in their own division. I like Miami more than them. Thoughts?
No, I definitely have to agree with you. You talk about their roster from head to toe. It might be one of the worst in the entire NFL, right? You talk about the skill positions. They have nobody. And then Mac Jones, I mean, I can't even begin to say all the horrible things that he was doing in preseason games left and right, throwing ducks to, the other team. So it was kind of ridiculous to see what they were doing. And, the running backs, you like Ramondre Stevenson, the raw monster, and you like Damian Harris, but how much can they really do for this team And then you talk
Right.
about the AFC, just how much better they've gotten year after year, and even their own division, the Bills are now the new kings in the AFC, and it's going to be really difficult for them to be even like playoff hopefuls this year, just like you were saying, and I'm really low on them as well. But moving on to my second low team, I think you also are kind of semi fan of this team. It is the Washington Commanders. All right. Now you're going to talk about on and on and on about their upgrade. Oh, Ben Roethlisberger to Mr. Trubisky is an upgrade, isn't it? Well, Taylor Heineke, from Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz, is also an upgrade. Okay.
Correct.
I can tell you that one is greater than two, right? But is one as great as 10? No. Okay. And that's what I'm going to tell you about this upgrade. It's from a 1 to a 2. All right. And then you talk about what's going on with their running back room. It is crazy. One of them gets shot up and he's going to be out until around week 5. And then the other one is going to be relegated from starter last year to punt returner. And now de facto, he's going to be running back 1. But it's ridiculous what's going on with this team. And then we've known this has just been a terrible franchise for as long as they've been around. Their owner has been terrible. And they're going to be missing Chase Young to start the season. And so I don't really have high hopes for this team, especially when they play in a division against the Eagles, who are going to be on the come up this year, the Cowboys, who have just owned them forever and ever. And the NFC, you can look at it and see, oh, they might be able to sneak in here and there, but I just feel like they don't have the roster. You can talk about all the defensive linemen that they have, but they're gonna have to score points to win games. And Terry McLaurin, a lot of people say he's the best receiver to come out of his class, but he's just never had a solid quarterback to throw him the ball or get it to him deep. And so we'll see how big of an upgrade Carson Wentz is this year. But look at the Indianapolis Colts of last season, where they just had to beat the Jaguars once to win and get in, and we saw how that turned out. So tell me about Carson Wentz, Mr. Butler.
Gladly. So Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke to Carson Wentz, you described it as a 1 to a 2, which, you're a bit underselling it. I think it's a significant upgrade, but you think about, you just said about Terry McLaurin, he's never had a good quarterback. He has a really good quarterback now. He's going to show all the offensive flash that he has not been able to prove in this offense. You still have Antonio Gibson, who had a really good season last year. He's had his fumbling issues. And you have J.D. McKissick, who's a really good receiving back. So Carson Wentz is still going to be thriving in the play-action game, which, say what you will, he's always been a really good play-action quarterback in his career. Their offensive line, I think, is one of the most underrated units in all of football. They have really good Wes Schweitzer, Trey Turner, Charles Leno Jr., who's really good, Sam Cosmi. I mean, they have a lot of underrated but solid offensive pieces. You still have Logan Thomas at tight end. I mean, their offense, it doesn't have the household names because they were held back by Taylor Heineke. And the defense, even without Chase Young, they still have Montez Sweat. They still have Jonathan Allen. They still have Daron Payne. They have studs on studs on studs. And secondary has only gotten better. Troy Apke, they bring in Kendall Fuller, William Jackson now on the defense. Just bring in that veteran experience for guys like Cameron Crowe, for guys like Bobby McCain. It's just more and more and more. There's a lot of things I like about this team in a division where, yes, I like the Eagles, as I mentioned previously in the podcast, but I'm not that high on the Cowboys. I'm definitely not high on the Giants. So as a frisky wild card outlook, I think is very much in play. And I think your personal biases against Carson Wentz are kind of clouding your judgment and judging this team and their roster on a fair scale. And yes, I gave you a lot of what ifs and let's seize week 1, Jacksonville. What if, let's see this Washington team?
Yeah, we're going to see Carson Wentz travel to Jacksonville once again, just like we did last year in week 17, where they needed to get the dub and go to the playoffs, and he didn't get it done. Let me ask you something, Lewis. Who had a better roster last year, the Commanders or the Colts?
Last year? Or are you saying who's had a better roster, this year's Commanders or last year's Colts?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This year's Commanders have a better roster than last year's Colts.
Okay, well, I have to totally disagree. Last year they had the Colts had the number one running back in the NFL, and you saw how that offense was. You talk about play action. That's an offense where you can thrive in the play action with, and with Antonio Gibson to Michael Pittman.
Oh, a second-year receiver.
And Mo Alley Cox.
Who else?
And Mo Alley Cox.
Oh, I forgot about Mo Alley Cox.
Don't sleep on Mo Alley Cox.
He must have slipped my mind.
6'7" giant. I don't know how he slipped out of your mind.
Listen, we're going to get into a lot of these teams and a lot of these matchups, but this Thursday is the start of the NFL season, and we finally have football where we can put all these arguments, all this banter, all this preseason talk to rest, where we finally get to see cleats hitting the ground with the Buffalo Bills heading to Los Angeles to take on the Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are a 2.5-point underdog at home, as according to FanDuel. Laraib, you want to get into kind of how you're feeling in this game and what goes into a week one prediction?
Well, you have to look at a lot of things, Lewis. You think about preseason hype or offseason acquisitions. Even you're looking for the Rams in this case. Super Bowl hangover. There's a lot of factors that go into here, and then you talk about any injuries that some players might be having, and all sorts of different things. But let's talk about injuries a little bit, Lewis. For the Rams, Matthew Stafford all offseason long has been dealing with an elbow injury in his throwing arm, and then recently reports have come out of camp that he's also having shoulder pain in that same throwing arm. So that's something to look out for throughout this entire season, especially in this week one game. And then just over the last 2 weeks, both the starting running backs for the Rams have had hamstring issues, and soft muscle tissue issues as well. But they're both ready for week one. But those are just some injuries to look at. And that might be the reason why these Rams are 2.5-point underdogs at home.
Yeah, I don't know if you really leaned a certain way, but they're just bigger question marks for this Rams team coming off Super Bowl, which they won the Super Bowl, give them all the credit in the world. And a hangover goes both ways. After a fun night of partying, having a great time, you're still going to be hungover the next day, no matter what. If you're on the winning side or the losing side, you see teams regress that season after, and that comes with a lot of teams poaching away some of your valuable starters, including Von Miller, who is now on the Buffalo Bills, ready to get another ring with a promising young defense and a solidified top offense with one of the best players in the NFL, Josh Allen, at the helm. I just want to talk about some notable offseason losses as well for the Rams. Darius Williams, really good slot corner. Sebastian Joseph-Day, one of their more solidified run stoppers. Austin Corbett, an offensive lineman. They also lost Andrew Whitworth due to retirement, and they traded away Robert Woods. So that's a lot of key starters that they could kind of rely on, except for Robert Woods. He was injured last season. But a lot of key guys that they weren't the Jalen Ramseys. They weren't the Aaron Donalds. They weren't the big flashy names that made the huge plays. These are guys who did their jobs. They were consistent, and you could rely on them. And that offensive line is rough. I mean, replacing Andrew Whitworth, a Hall of Famer, with Joseph Noteboom. I don't know if you've ever heard of that name before, Rob, but let's see how he does against Von Miller on Thursday. So I'm leaning Bills here. If I had, I would definitely probably go with the Bills to cover that 2.5 on the road. I know road dogs, a team as good as the Rams, it's hard. They're gonna get their banner unveiled. It's hard to bet against them, but I'm just really high on the Bills this season, and I think they start this potential Super Bowl run with an exclamation point to start the season.
Yeah, for sure. And just like everybody else on that Bills bandwagon this season, you can definitely tell they definitely have a target on their back. All the offensive players that they have, they bring in the rookie James Cook. They haven't been able to run the ball as well for the past couple of seasons. They're bringing in a receiving running back. We'll see how well he compare with Josh Allen. But for the Rams, you got to trust what you already know. And, they bring in Bobby Wagner. So Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, and Aaron Donald are just going to be wreaking havoc on the Bills. And so I really like the Rams in this one at home. You don't have to travel for week one. Bills coming all the way from the East Coast. We know how that goes down when an East Coast team is traveling West Coast. or West Coast teams having to travel to the East Coast. So the home field advantage is going to be a really big deal for those type of games. And Sean McVay, I can really trust him. He's going to be excited to win the Super Bowl and come back for another one, right? Aaron Donald was having talks about retiring this offseason, and he's like, you know what? Screw that. No, we're going to win another one this year, so I'm coming back. And so this team has really high aspirations for this upcoming season. And same for the Bills. I know they're really hungry after the past 2 seasons losing to the Chiefs. That disappointing loss, and they're also going to be really hungry. But I like the Rams in this one, but it's going to be a great game, Lewis.
Absolutely. We're just excited to have football back, and we'll get into our full week 1 schedule preview on our Thursday podcast, so stay tuned for that. Or we're going to go into our locks, our upsets, our best bets, best values, and all of our picks for that week, and we'll include that one in there as well. I think we're starting off this season of excitement, this season of parity. We're going to be disagreeing a lot, so I'm looking forward to that. Anything else you want to say before we end this first episode?
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Like we said in the beginning, if you have any suggestions or you're looking for any of our socials, we'll have it linked down. Be sure to comment anything that you'd like to see on a future episode. And we're so glad that you guys are here for our journey for the 2022 and 2023 NFL season.
Yep. And this is Lewis and my beautiful co-host Laraib signing out.
Peace.